We finished the basic studies on the financial stuff on using Python. In the second hour, we'll pick up the case study, which I wanted to take up for today. And we'll invest the second hour discussing what would be the right model to use. And in the second half of the day, we will try to encode part of it, if not all of it. Okay. We will try to avoid use of any GPUs because we are having different machines. So we'll try to encode everything on CPUs. So we'll keep the entire matrix to be simpler. Good. So I believe some of you would have landed here yesterday when we were looking at rolling statistics. To make your life easier, today we will give you most of the codes using Colab. Because we spent a lot of time yesterday trying to fix spelling mistakes. Okay? But it's always a good start to start coding on your own rather than copying and pasting, at least to understand what each word meant. Good. So we're looking at Apple share or Amazon share, and you might have got something similar, a graph yesterday. So, one of the aims for us to look while looking at any time series data, particularly when it comes to stocks, is a very simple question. Should I buy or should I sell? Right? And I have got a time series data. I'm at any one particular point of time. What should I do now? Rather than buy or sell, the question asked is a little bit different. The question is, should I keep the shares which I already have? Or am I incurring a negative return on my share? So I should only keep a share if it's giving me a positive return. Agreed? Alternatively, if the share prices are going down, then, so the first order principle would be if share prices are going up, keep it. If share prices are going down, that's not the best idea. But immediate point looking at naive forecast, just looking at one point, something is going down or something is going up, may not be the best approach to look at a long-term view. Now, yesterday, while looking at the statistical analysis, we talked about this moving average idea. Right? So rather than taking average of the entire history, you take average of some history. So what we could now do, if we go back to, let's see, one of them. So if we now go back and look at the data here, rather than looking at so let's try to find two different moving averages. One which is a short-term moving average with a small number of data points from where we are. And one which is a longer-term moving average. So the longer-term moving average which you'll be looking at how the share is behaving over a long period of time. And the shorter one will possibly tell you how it has behaved in the last few days or so. Okay? And then we need to decide, so rather than looking at our spot price as to what has happened immediately to our price, what has happened to these two averages? How are these two? Is my long-term average better than my short-term average or the vice versa? Okay. So hopefully you still have the codes. If it doesn't matter, we'll give it to you. So once again, we read the raw data. And now we try to find out the rolling mean for two different Windows frames. We have started following again Choubey's textbook, and we will try to find, say, two different window sizes, 142, 252. It's a randomly selected number to start with. We'll then later try to find out what is the optimum rolling window size. Okay. So let's just take any one of the share prices. Let's start with Apple because I ran the code with Apple. When it's running with Amazon, life is a little bit tricky, and we will know why it was. And then look at, I've taken two numbers. Why don't you each one of you select a different set of numbers? So take a small number between 20 and 50 for your smaller rolling window, and take a bigger number for the and then plot both of these on the same figure, including the share prices. Okay. So I've got a figure like this. Let's see if you can get something like this. For some reason, my animations have refused to work today. So all of you still have your data from yesterday. You know where to read the raw data? Good. If somebody has missed, I can open my Colab file and then we can go from there. Excuse me. Can somebody close the door, please? And after finding these two moving averages, we will try to come up with a strategy of, of an algorithmic trading strategy without human intervention. Can we ask a computer what to do when share prices are behaving differently? So have you been, so any luck in getting these graphs? Or are we all starting from fresh today? Starting from fresh? In which case, then let me share my documentary here. So just to revisit what we did yesterday, for those who were new to Python, we basically included pandas, imported pandas and NumPy in our code. And then we read a very simple CSV file. Either we download it on our own machine or we can read it directly online. And then all I'm saying is I've created, that's my raw data. And I'm now going to pick, rather than using a data frame object, I'm going to use a series. So I'm just going to pick one of these and then just create averages, as simple as that. Now for those of you who are, let's see if my short link still works for today. Because if you have got computing accesses, may not be a bad idea I give it to you directly. It works. Works, doesn't work? Works. Good. In which case, if you want to go online directly, that is a short link and it will provide you the access to the code. Short url.at/olrlq. It is still smaller than the passwords we have here. Or use the shorter one, don't try to type the whole long. So if we now see, I will trust that you will be able to get a graph waveform like this. So if we now see conceptually something interesting is happening, my long-term average, my short-term average is kind of following the share prices, right? If you look at my orange line, it is following the blue line here. Which is not surprising because we have given a shorter window for it to look in the past. Now my long-term average behaves differently at different point of time. Sometimes it's lower than short-term average, sometimes it's higher than short-term average. So now comes the question, how do we use these two figures to determine our trading strategy? Now, the answer is kind of given on the screen, but I would still like you guys to think about it and give me feedback. So if my long-term average is worse than my short-term average, what should I do? And why? You guys are not going to be investors, are you? Or at least you're not thinking of being one. So I hold a share right now. Its market value is more than what I paid for it. Should I sell it or should I keep it? Keep it. The market is doing better, right? If I sell it, the market improves tomorrow, I will be in a loss. So this is called the long position. Okay, I'm keeping whatever I hold. On the other hand, if my short-term market is worse than my long-term market, what should I do? Still keep it. Well, we have somebody who doesn't want to do anything with whatever investments she have. And that's actually not surprising. A large number of investors, particularly in the Indian market, are people who try to keep things over a longer duration of time. So rather than keeping it, well, we can keep our shares. Let's try to figure out another strategy. How about we sell shares which we don't have? Precisely. Well, if we think in the longer term we can buy a share at a lower price than what the market is giving right now, then I can offer to you saying, I will sell you a share at 10 rupees, but I myself would be able to buy it for 9 rupees tomorrow. You will commit to buy it at 10 rupees from me today. I will buy the shares tomorrow at 9 rupees and sell it to you and make profit of 1 rupees. Now, in the bigger industry, okay, let's just not talk about shares. Let's talk about wider commodities market. Say I'm an airline industry. What are my costs? I have to pay salary to my staff members, which I know. It's kind of fixed cost, and I know how the pilot salary and the air hostess salary is going to go up or down. What is my other big cost? Fuel, right? And the fuel prices go up and down. And that makes my life quite miserable in predicting what's going to be my revenue for the year. So rather than trusting the market value, it may not be a bad idea for me to talk to a fuel supplier and say, hey, you know what? Whatever is your price, I will pay you 2 rupees extra, but commit to that price for the next year or so. Right? Now, if I think oil prices are going to go up, I'm actually making a profit, because tomorrow the oil prices will go up overall in a span of 1 year. I make profit. If on the other hand oil prices go down, then I suffer a loss. Right? I don't know how the energy market works in India. Do you guys know how you pay for your electricity bill? Are you in a firm commitment that the prices will remain same for the next year, or they can change any point of time? So it's a very market-driven strategy. Okay. So quite often in Europe and other places, energy companies try to, because do you have a competition in the energy sector here? There's only one provider, you have many providers of electricity. So you have many providers of electricity. So it's area driven. So if I live in a house, I do not have a choice which one I buy electricity from. So in many open market economies, what they have done is the infrastructure is owned by one company, and people who supply you could be one of many. So they buy electricity from the supplier. So it goes through the same electric cables to come to your house, and then you have a choice to pick which one of these you use. The same happens for telephone network, or for that matter in the British railway system for the railway network. So in India, the Indian Railways runs everything. It runs the track, it manages the platforms, and it runs the trains. A few years ago, they tried running commercial trains. IRCTC, an arm of Indian Railways, was trying to run trains which were considered more like a private company. So you can imagine a situation wherein tracks are owned by one company, but two different companies ply the trains on the same thing. Something which we see in the bus network. The roadways are owned by the roadways people, but you have different bus companies competing for a customer. Right? So in a similar fashion, you can have a market for energy or market for any infrastructure driven things. Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, that's a very debatable thing. If you ask economists 30 years ago in 80s and 90s, it was a good thing. Everything should be open. Right? The more the competition in market, the better resources, better return the customer gets. However, what has been seen, particularly in the British sector, that yes, the customer gets immediate returns very quickly, but then the long-term decision making gets further delayed. Also, long-term maintenance of the track, long-term maintenance of the infrastructure. That is because when many companies are fighting over a resource, what's to get profit for its shareholders? Particularly, say for an electricity company, the aim is not to provide electricity to you. The aim is to make money for its shareholders. And shareholders are not going to wait 10 years for their return. Whereas infrastructure development, say if you're trying to make a new dam or new wire line, that takes a longer period of time. So because of this market, immediately you gain and benefit. But in the longer term, the customer starts losing because the customer has to throw more money to get the infrastructure at the same place. I know we are talking about Apple shares here, but there is something interesting which has also happened in the airline industry in India. So what has happened in last 20 years? Can somebody summarize the whole marketplace of airline industry in India? So what are the big players left now? And that's about it. Right? There are some smaller players which are SpiceJet has written, and then you have Akasha Air which is also doing, but they are comparatively smaller. So what was the case 20 years ago? So we all started with a single company, right? There was just Air India to start with, and then we liberalized the market. So if you look at the history of Indian airline industry, the sheer number of startups which have come over the years and collapsed over the years is strange. If you visited India because I take a snapshot every 6 months or a year of the airline industry in India whenever I have to fly to India and I have to book the cheapest ticket possible. I'm still a student in my mind. So for 3 years ago or just before COVID hit, you had a multitude of options. Right? You had Go Air, Air India Vistara combination merger had not happened. Air Asia was already a fighter. So we had a lot of market choice, but now our market choice is very diminishing. So at one hand, the market worked brilliantly. It brought loads of choices and the competition led to each one of us benefiting, the end customer benefiting. But the shareholders did not benefit that much. That's why the companies kept on collapsing. And as a result of that, we have kinda ending in a monopoly again, aren't we? When I was flying to Jharsuguda, there was only one airline to pick from, and that airline could have charged me 100,000 rupees and I would have given it. Okay? So for vital resources, it's still an open question for things like transport, electricity, telephone network. If market economy is the ideal. Now this is my theory and I may be completely wrong about my theory. I'm not an economist, so engineers should be very shy of giving theories in other fields. But hey, we are engineers, we always think we are the best of them all. So my theory has something to do with entropy. You know thermodynamics, remember entropy? You guys are earlier year of engineers, so you should know what. So I believe if you leave any system, it will go bad. So if you have a single monopoly system, in due course of time, it starts behaving badly. And a very good example is Indian Railways. There has been only few years when it has made profit for its shareholder. Who is the shareholder of Indian Railways? The government of India, right? Now it has a monopoly on a big track part of transportation in India, right? If you have to go to Delhi and you're not in the flight sector, the only option is the railways. It also has a monopoly on large goods transportation in India, things like coal transport or anything, because road network is not terribly great in many parts of India. Despite all this, it does not make that much of a profit. And think of it this way. We have got these two terminologies, which is I've only seen here. There's something called waiting list and reservation against cancellation. So you have customers who are willing to give you money and you can't provide them the services. Think of it, if there's a bus network, there will be another company which will come in and provide a bus. Yes, there are people willing to go, but we can't do that in the railways. Of course, there are other limitations which the railways has. A government firm, it can't increase the fares tremendously. It has to do the social good. It has been very good in doing the social good. But despite having a monopoly, it cannot provide you everything. Right? So that's a bad part of a monopoly. And the same thing was true with Indian Airlines. Many years ago, when I lived in Northeast, if you had to fly, you actually get in touch with your MP or the minister to have a word with the Air India officials to give you a ticket. You had the money. Can I get a ticket to go to Delhi? Same was true for telephone network. To get a telephone in your house, you had a long waiting list. And now, Getting a SIM card has to be the easiest thing on the planet Earth. So we went from now one monopoly to a market-based economy. When complete market-based economy happens by itself, then that also starts deteriorating. Remember, I was talking about non-investment in infrastructure, particularly for water companies in UK. So if you leave a pure market-based economy, in due course of time, it deteriorates as well. So my personal take on this is market is neither good or bad. It's just not perfect. So what you need to keep on giving is the reality doses to the market from time to time. So we need to keep on going from pure market to pure government run to pure determined, and this pendulum should be swinging from time to time. Or else, if you leave any one of them, things will go bad. Neither of them is good enough. And that's my 2 pence on it. Most probably I'm wrong. An economist will come someday and kill me for stating something in their field. But that's what it is. Good. So we decided, coming back to our time series data, we decided that in a situation like here, wherein my short-term moving average is doing much better than my long-term moving average, it will be better to keep the share, right? Or have a long position. When my long-term average is better than my short-term average, it's better to short sell it or short the shares. So as a result, we get these windows. Now, ideally, there are only small amount of time when we are actually doing a transaction, right? So in all of this time, this window, and this window, we should not be doing a transaction. We should just keep the shares. Now here comes the catch with all of these software-driven stuff. So quite a lot of time we are going to assume that there are no costs involved in doing any transaction, which is actually not true. Every time you buy or sell a share, you have to pay commission to the person, you have to pay taxes on the profit gained. So we're going to assume all of this does not, if all of this does not exist, then what we should be doing is keep the shares long here, and do exactly the opposite of it. So if I now define a position vector, my position is +1 here, +1 here, +1 here. So +1 for keep and -1 for shorting. So we can then define a position vector, as I said, which will be depending upon if my short-term average is bigger than long-term average, keep the shares, otherwise do a short. Then I could define this thing. So this is what I had a window space for Apple. And this is my window space for Intel. Now Intel is a much more older firm and it has gone through more ups and downs. Hardware sector goes through different transitions. And what we are now seeing is we have got a very small window sometime, particularly when the difference between the short-term and long-term moving average is not tremendously big. So this pure blunt two-way strategy of saying as soon as one is bigger than the other, go short, otherwise keep long, may not work terribly brilliantly always. So let's run this code. So you guys should have written... I have to log in now. Brilliant. Which my log? Or should I trust your system? Can I share my machine? Because then I can run it nicely. Actually, let's go through it and then we'll come back to it too. I will be able to log in and see if we can run it. We can show it to you guys for running. Okay. Now, if we go by this strategy, so till now you know, so what we have defined is that we have defined a position vector here that we will long or short our shares, and now we need to know. So that sounds like a good strategy, but does that strategy actually make us money? Now, in order to do that, we can do a bit of backtracking. So say we have done this. What do we make? What's the difference of what this girl said right in the beginning? We don't sell our shares, we keep our shares. So that will still lead to some return on investment, right? If the share, because Apple has done quite well. So we bought it here at 2011. Right now it's already gone up. So we have gone from 40 to 180. So had we kept it, we would have still made a decent return. So having kept it or having gone long and short in between, does that make us money? So the one way to check that will be to identify a returns vector. And now we are looking at the log return. Remember yesterday we talked about percentage change in share or log change in share. So we need to define a returns series, and then we just say, okay, for long, our strategy is simple. We go +1, -1 if we suffer loss. And we multiply these two to find, if we go by this strategy of shopping, what will be my return? So my classic return is just the log return. My strategic return is it's +1 when I'm long, it's -1 that times when I'm short. Okay. We remove all the NAs, and then you just add up all the log returns. So the code does, let's see if possibly I can run it from here, and then that can. So this is for Apple here. No, it's not for Apple. It is for Amazon, is it? Right, then let's change it to Apple. Give me a wee sec. I'll run it on my machine and then. Still connecting to Google Compute. Initializing. Connected. Right, so hopefully, if I save it, if I'm lucky, it would have. Yes. So I've got a window like this, which you can see. I've got areas when I should be going long, a large number of areas, and just 2 short areas when I should go short. So if I follow the strategy, if I just follow the waveform as it is, my return will always follow the share's return. So log return of the share, if I follow the strategy, I will have a positive return. I will just multiply it negatively here. So if I now look at my total return over the entire period of time, if I left it as it is, I would have got a return value of 4 some units. If I had followed the strategy, I would have got 5.8. Using these two numbers of looking at the moving average. Okay. And this is what happens to my return. If I now plot the return, what we have done very simply is just looked at the cumulative sum of return, because return is not 1 point. So I'm looking at how my return adds up over a period of time. Don't worry, you guys will have access to this code so you can play with it later as well. And this is understandable. So initially my returns and strategy follow one another. So in this period of time, I'm keeping my shares long. I'm keeping them, I'm doing nothing. Okay. In this window, I'm going short. So had I not done anything, my returns are a certain value. Because I'm selling short, my actual return following the strategy is exactly the opposite of that. You can see, this is -1 times this waveform. The orange one is negative. And then when I again become long, my strategic return follows my default return as well. So it's the two ones are exactly having same slope. It's just because I have gone short here, I have got a boost. Okay. Once again, I go short in this region and my strategic return is inverse of that, or -1 times multiplied. And once I come back to doing long again, both of them follow one another. But over a period of time, by doing this strategy, I actually have ended up making a higher return than had I made the return by just following it. Okay. Now I started with these two numbers of short moving average and long moving average, 42 and 252. The question, of course, to be asked is, what's this number? How do we learn this number? Okay. Two ways of doing it. Either we can do a neural network based approach, where we can go and say, okay, fine, this is what has happened in the past. See what's the most optimum one. Or if we are lazy, we can go a brute force iterative approach. So that's the first approach which is shown here. And the idea is essentially this. For both SMA1 and SMA2, the moving average, the short moving average and the long moving average, I just try with a large number of. So we go from 20 to 61, and for the long one, we go from 180 to 281. We just try with different numbers and see which one of them gives us the highest return. And if we do that, so the return ratio which we had with the standard strategy. So we go from about 0.25% gain or 25% gain to almost 200% gain by picking a different number. So 40 and 190 would have given us the highest return. And this is just by brute force applying on something. Now here comes the caveat. We only worked on Apple shares, right? Can we use the same strategy for another company's share? Will the same thing work for Intel or Amazon? Will the same thing work on Apple at a different point of time? Because may. Well, if you say completely not, then we are pretty much defeating neural networks completely, like learning-based systems. So you are right. The problem of these is what we often end up with, some sort of overfitting. Parameters which work very well for a given time series data and return for one share will be so bad for the other share that you end up making losses. They may even be in bad for the same set of shares at a different point of time. So mathematically it looks fantastic. Yes, if I go long and short, I make more money. But this again dependent on our choice of these two moving averages. What is actually a short window of looking at data? Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a month? And in real practice, there are other factors which are influencing it as well. So the question to be asked then is, say Google and Apple, they're both kind of similar companies. Okay, not necessarily. One is a search engine based firm, other originated as a hardware firm, but both are having similar space to operate in. So are they influencing one another? Where does Apple make its money from? Sorry? Devices like computers, handheld, mobile phones. Where does Google makes its money from? Search engine. It also tries to sell handhelds. So is it reasonable to assume that Google comes up with a very good phone? The Apple, it's not reasonable to assume. She has given Google cannot make a good phone. End of the story. Pardon? Oh, that's an interesting question. Sorry, guys, I have to discuss this. So, use the word security and Apple together. So, why do you think Apple systems are more secure than Google systems? You mean data privacy. So these are two different words, guys. One is security, saying how secure is my device? Can somebody else takes my device? Another is privacy. My company is taking data from me. How private is it going to keep them? Okay. Sorry? So is that a fact or is that a market strategy which they have identified? But if I am Apple, I know I have got loyal customers like you, some of you. I can charge anything and you'll pay for the white phone. Or in the next year, I will go for slightly grayish phone. And if I want to make your life nice, oh, this year we'll have a dark phone. So think of it 2 generations ago, till Apple came up with its own hardware. The processor used in Apple laptops was exactly the same as processor used anywhere. They were Intel-based machines. Right? Now, I agree from you from a software perspective, at least in the computing world, Mac as an operating system, because it's based on Linux or based on Unix, not based on Linux, there will be a big copyright rivalry going on between these two. So, but Apple is based on, Mac OS is based on the old BSD Unix. It may be considered to be more safe than Microsoft-based systems. Now, it's not, Microsoft-based systems are not unsafe. Let's be very clear. It's the end users who are unsafe. Right? Very few times in our history has the computing infrastructure itself been hacked. It has happened when there are viruses and bugs in the code, but bugs in the codes are rarer than actually we sending you an email saying click here to get your Janma Kundi and you click there and give us everything. Right? So the end users are of a different species, the two end users of different. How many of you use Linux here? 1.5%? 2.5%. So I would like to argue that Linux is the safest operating system and the most user-friendly as well. Rest of all, you are smiling. Linux user-friendly. So we used to have this buzzword about Linux. Linux is very friendly. It's just picking about which friends to choose. Once it selects your friend, it's quite nice to it. So we are coming back to the market pricing of the Apple. Apple has done a very good marketing strategy, no doubt about that. And they sell very good products. I'm not going to complain about the product strategy of these two. What I was going to say is, hypothetically imagine Google comes up with a phone which is better perceived than Apple in the market. Actually, this is what happened about 10 or 15 years ago. When all of a sudden, a company which used to make computers decided to make a mobile phone. And the then market leaders of mobile phone world, Nokia, Samsung, had a culture shock. This is when Apple decided to enter the mobile phone industry. It was not a mobile phone company in past. Right? So, now, hypothetically, let's assume Google comes up with a better phone or better in market. I mean, their phones are fairly decent. I will never complain about Google. They have a longer lasting shelf life than most other phones I have ever used. They last for a longer. At least they give you 7 security updates, the newer Pixel. For 7 years, they will provide you update. How many years does Apple provide update for? No, they do provide update for few years. I think, pardon? 2 or 3 years is, I think, their 4 years might be the number because I don't use Apple on phone industry. So the question here is this: if somebody comes up with a better phone which starts attracting market, or one of these Chinese manufacturers, who gets to lose the market? Apple. So that person's share prices are going to be related to my share prices. The whole discussion we did was we right now analyzed Apple shares as if it's the only share in the market. It's not going to be influenced by anything else, which was a bit of an incorrect assumption. But also the only assumption we can make, because we don't know what is going to affect it. I mean, okay, one logic I said was fine, there might be issues related to market, there might be other players who could come in, or one of the existing players. Samsung finally makes a very good phone which lasts for 10 years. At the same time, there are other factors in play. For Russia-Ukraine war happens, the supply of rare earth metals to make chips gets diminished. And all of a sudden, all the hardware companies are in trouble. So my original bread and butter is chip design, and we suffered quite a lot in coronavirus times because all the engineers stopped working. Software engineers can work from home. Physically manufacturing engineers can't work from home. We haven't come up with that, the V-type interface. If you have to put a hammer, do this thing in your home, and a hammer gets ticked in the factory. That'll be ideal, but we haven't come up with that yet. We reached that extent that Vauxhall, a large car manufacturer based in UK, they stopped using digital speedometers and went back to the analog ones, because analog ones they were there in their factory. The digital ones were not coming in. So when we make chips for AI, our general supply time is about 3 months. During coronavirus, we are having supply times for about a year. And some of the chips we haven't got back with the ones which we submitted that time. So there are other factors which are in play. So the best assumption which we can make is the market is perfect. We have no transaction cost. And this is the only share in the market. Do some approximation and then put a noise on it to contribute to all other things which are happening in the market. Because anything else will make our system too complex. Of course, the more complex the system we have, the better prediction we would have. Okay? And this leads us to the second issue of data correlation. So we talked about Apple and Google having some sort of data correlation. Maybe Google and Microsoft would have also some sort of data correlation. They're both software companies operating in slightly different space, but they share quite a lot of space either. Sometimes it's difficult to see what kind of data correlation which is there in the market. So if we go here, let's look at the whole thing back again. Remember the 12 figures which we plotted? There should be somewhere here. Here, yes. So VIX is the volatility index. Can you see it looking similar to any one of others or being correlated to any one of the others? So just by visualizing it, it's difficult to find this. However, if you ask economists, they know volatility is opposite of being stable and calm. So if something is stable and calm, the volatility index will go down and vice versa. And if you're looking things like the Standard & Poor's 500 index, they are measuring 500 different shares. Right? So there should be an inverse relationship between these two. And we can't see that here. For one reason is that these numbers are different for each one of them. And if I plot, say, in this case, we plotted, my apologies for moving a bit faster, the Standard & Poor's S&P index versus the volatility index, I don't see any correlation here. But if you plot them differently, you might see as my volatility went up here, something happened to this. And same again here. Every time my volatility went up, my SP index started going down. Okay? So even though the fact they are on two different scales, this has generally been constantly increasing, they are inversely correlated with one another. And actually, if you plot then for a smaller window, you can see that there is a decent inverse correlation. Every time my volatility goes down, this SP index goes up. So that could be something worth looking at with normalized data sets. Explore this. Again, the code for this will be provided for, so I'm not forcing you guys to do much of this thing. So in order to find correlation, remember we are interested in returns rather than absolute changes or even absolute values. Okay? So we are not interested in what's the value of a share, but if I have this share, what am I going to get out of it? Not the exact money. So one idea would be calculate the log returns first and then find these volatility clusters. So if you do that, if you do the log return value, so this was just plotting the absolute numbers, and if you plot the log return value, then it starts looking very, very correlated with one another. Okay? Good. I think my friend's entry here was a sign for me to stop talking and take a break. Or continue. Okay. Generally, when you walk in, you always ask me to stop. Okay. One more thing which we would see before we stop time series analysis is actually I have plotted the same thing in scatter plots, and you can see that there is a very decent relation. It's inversely related relations. If I plot my volatility index on the y-axis and my Standard & Poor index on the x-axis, that looks fairly linear. Good. So this is what I thought we will talk through. I'm kind of hoping this kind of codes you guys will be able to write on your own. So I'm not going to force you to write it. So how many share prices did we look recently? We're looking at 4 different companies, right? And how many data points we had? Roughly 200, or was it 2000? So it was still a small data set, right? Now let's try to do this, and this will be a task for you now. So now we are going to download a high frequency data, the TIX data. So a very good high frequency data is the currency conversion data, because that changes pretty much every minute or every hour or so, or every second. So from the same web page, remember from where we downloaded the previous data set, you have the web page link. So use the first part as the same web page, and then you have got a different file to download here. Actually, should I be able to let me put the full path here, okay? So that that should work. Let's see if it works. Kind of works. So from the same web page, or if you can't download, I will give it to you. Please download this file. This is a high frequency data. And then what we would like to do is to resample this data as 5-minute interval. And let's look at the time which our machines take. Okay. So let's read that CSV data. First download it, read it. And the exercise won't be very difficult because we've already done something like this. I'm not going to give you the code for this. Let's see it, read it, and then just plot it at 5-minute interval. And once we are done with that, we will move on to our case analysis. What's the time now? Is it 11 o'clock already? Okay, now I will take a break now for at least 5 minutes while you guys try to download the file. Your pass hona chahiye, right? So in the lunch break, I will dig all your emails and we will send you the data set as well as the research paper. Okay? and then I will leave an hour completely in the second half of the day for you guys to discuss, form groups. I will come and talk to each group, and then we will see where it goes from there. So, have you been able to plot something in 5 minutes interval here? Good. Now tell me, what should be the strategy? When to buy euro, when to sell euros. How can we come up with an algorithmic strategy? Should it be instantaneous? Every time euro goes up, because you'll also have some transaction time involved. And just on the day I'm teaching, they decide to bang things. Good. This leads us to our first case study. So even though we will not be doing all the case studies in detail, I will go through the fundamental questions here and we'll discuss. So the first case study which I wanted to explore to you was a very simple question. Will my customer come back? So I have sold something to a customer. Will he or she come back? And there's a vital question for any business relationships to ask. The paper to read is a paper which we published. This was to predict customer choices based on price recommender model. It's a bit longish paper. The link is there. We will send you the link by email today as well when I collect all the emails. Okay? So let's make this question a bit broad and ask 3 questions. How do we know what our customer wants? Because he or she will only come back if we know what he or she wants. Right? And once he's there in our store, how do we force or convince or excite him to buy more? And once he or she has bought something, how do we ensure he or she is retained? He or she does not go to somewhere else. Now, this is a very broad question. That's the entire question of field of marketing is there. We have to narrow down the questions because these questions will be asked differently based on what kind of shop I run. If I'm the only photocopier in the local market, I have a monopoly. People will come back to me. But if I'm selling vegetables and there are 5 other vegetable shops nearby, then I need to think very carefully. Okay. So one of the problems for data analysts which we have, or data-based people we have in this world, is even though people buy a lot of things, you all buy a lot of things, from a seller point of view, oh boy, this is going to be annoying. From a seller point of view, there is actually a very much scarcity of data. So let's take the example of clothing industry. Right? We all buy clothes. We don't buy shops. My apologies. We all buy clothes. Some of us buy more clothes than others. Right? But how frequently do we buy this? 2 or 3 months, right? Every festival. Right? So say all of you are my customers and I'm a clothes shop maker. I own a clothes shop. Now I need to know when will she buy more things from me. But she has only bought 5 items in last 2 months. I'm selling 500 items. Right? How do I know whether she will like this item or that item or that item? Unless I know that thing, I can't keep extra stock of it. I can't then go and say, you know what, I think she likes, let's give a very harsh example of Kanchipuram saris. I'll order some Kanchipuram saris and next time she's in stock, here is a special 10% discount for you. But I don't know that. The sheer number of variety of items which even a clothes shop is selling is tricky. But what I do know is overall data. I've sold 10,000 jeans in a year. That I know. But I don't know individual advantage of individual preferences. Okay. So despite the fact the volume is large, volume per person or targeting is very small. The data is very sparse. And same thing goes with bigger industries like electronic appliances. Yes, you buy mobile phones, you buy once in 3 years. So I cannot figure out what you like, what an individual likes. Automobiles, furnitures, these are high-end costly items. And with each one of them, I know a broad statistics. I know overall this generation of people buy jeans as their one of the piece of their trousers. But what kind of jeans? Does that person like, the flared up jeans which were popular in 70s? I don't know that figure. And this problem is also true for places like supermarkets. So this might be a bit alien question when we don't have large supermarkets in India. They're still evolving, right? Do we have a larger supermarket in Rourkela? Have things like Vishal Mega Mart come here? They're decent sized supermarket. And you have the corner shops, right? The shops which sell everything from battery to toothbrush. They are our equivalent to supermarkets, right? So say you buy 100 items from a product in a month. And generally आप 100 चीजें खरीद रहे होंगे एक महीने में. But उस दुकान में 500 different type of चीजें हैं. Right? आप बैटरी तभी खरीदते हो जब आपकी बैटरी खत्म होती है. आटा गेहूं तभी खरीदते हो, चावल खरीदते जाते हो, बट देन हर का सबका अपना स्वाद है. सो इंडिविजुअल डेटा मेरे पास नहीं है. सो डिस्पाइट अ लार्ज अमाउंट ऑफ शॉपिंग डेटा आई हैव कि इतनी बैटरी यूज हुई, आई कैन कीप स्टॉक. I cannot do a recommendation system for my customers. I kind of hope and pray कि मेरे कस्टमर ओवरऑल ये चीजें खरीदेंगे. इंडिविजुअल कस्टमर को हम रेकमेंड नहीं कर सकते कुछ. Agreed? Good. Now this is not the first time we had this problem. This is a very old problem. But recently we have become more savvy क्योंकि market competition बढ़ रहा है. So how do you attract a customer? A customer should. So पुराने जमाने क्या होता था? There was a personal connection. कि वहाँ उस दुकान वाला आदमी हमको जानता है, हमको ओवरऑल में 10% डिस्काउंट देगा. बट इंडिविजुअली किस कस्टमर को क्या चाहिए अगर हम ये जान सकें एज अ शॉपकीपर, देन आई कैन टेलर माई गुड्स एंड आई कैन टेलर माई प्राइस सेंसिटिविटी फॉर दैट पर्सन. अगर मुझे पता है कि इनको रसगुल्ले अच्छे लगते हैं, तो द मोमेंट यू सी भास्कर चौबे जी, यू कैन से कि सर आज तो आपके लिए 20% डिस्काउंट है, 1 किलो खरीद के ले जाइए. एंड मोस्ट प्रोबेबली ही विल बाय, प्रोवाइडेड मुझे पता चले कि वो क्या खरीदना चाहते हैं. So sweet shops are nice. They only have 5 or 6 type or 10 types of items. But supermarkets are in this problem. So high volume data bhi hai, but large sparse data set hai. Right? So this is what happens. Then we can divide the products which we have in various bins. We have different types of products. We have batteries, we have food items, and there possibly we can know a bit of customer preference. Now, many chains in the Western world, they have started this concept of loyalty cards. Right? You basically get a loyalty card. The more you buy, the more discount we'll give you. The original idea of loyalty card was कि भैया हमें तो पता चले आप क्या खरीद रहे हैं. But there comes another problem with this. एक तो डाइवर्सिटी है, दूसरी है कि जब हर बार आप दुकान जाते हो तो आप डिफरेंट अमाउंट ऑफ गुड्स खरीदते हो. यू डोंट बाय द सेम करेंसी वैल्यू और द सेम नंबर एवरी टाइम यू गो टू द स्टोर. सो अब ये डेटा कलेक्शन वाला प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है. सो वी आर कलेक्टिंग डेटा. रिमेंबर वी आर डीलिंग विद डेटा टिल नाउ व्हिच आर ऑल नाइस डेटा. अभी जो भी डेटा हमने हैंडल किया वो अच्छा डेटा था. Agreed? It was structured. Very few data pieces were missing. But now I have to create a matrix. अगर हम एक इंडिविजुअल का शॉपिंग मैट्रिक्स क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, तो एक बार में 100 रुपए का, दूसरे बार में 1000 रुपए का, तीसरे बार में 99.5 रुपए का. So I have different products, I have different prices, and the size of the purchase is different every time. This does not bode well for computation. राइट? या तो हम डेटाबेस बहुत ही बड़ा बनाए, इसमें बहुत सारे एंट्री जीरो रहेंगे. So there is a diversity of item and there is incompleteness of the data. And then there is also something called structural sparsity. कोई एक कस्टमर सारे प्रोडक्ट नहीं खरीदता, right? Rather, कोई एक कस्टमर मेजॉरिटी ऑफ प्रोडक्ट में नहीं खरीदता. Most customers buy a minority of samples of the product. So now knowing what my customer wants or desires becomes even more tricky. So पहले हम लोग नाइव फोरकास्ट करते थे अपने पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस से, राइट? सो क्लासिक पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस था कि सर के बाल सफेद हो रहे हैं, सर अब डाइंग शैम्पू खरीदना शुरू करेंगे. But these are all personal experience, but they are not data driven. Doing any sort of analysis in this becomes very tricky. And that's what we would like to do. So it's a very simple thing. पहले प्रॉब्लम को इतना कॉम्प्लेक्स बनाओ तो ताकि कॉम्प्लेक्स सोल्यूशन बताएं तो आप लोगों को अटेंशन ले, सर कॉम्प्लेक्स प्रॉब्लम है ही.